In today's show, Ben Pfeifer joins the program, and we talk about the Blazers' young core, Toumani Camara and Scoot Henderson. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube, coming at you 3 days a week for the next 2 weeks. First 2 weeks of September were 3 days a week, and then it's back. It's on because the season is here. Media Day is about a month away as I am recording this, and starting September 16th, back to 5 days a week. But for now, 3 days a week, we're having a whole bunch of fun here. Today's show, it's going to be a fun one. First time guest on the program, Ben Pfeifer. You know him from NBA media world and the internet. Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It's certainly the off basketball or NBA dead season, I should say. Certainly
it is a good time to get away. It's a good time to get away. If you're an NBA media person, if you're an NBA executive, great time to take your last vacation because it's coming back with a vengeance. I kind of feel like typically back in the old school days, and I know like maybe the New Orleans Pelicans are in LA or something right now, except for Brandon Ingram because he's mad about his contract. But like typically Labor Day is when the younger players in the league start to trickle back into NBA facilities. So I think what we're going to see over the next week or so is the league kind of start to come back together. It's going to start to feel real again because we're going to see pictures of guys on practice courts. And before we do that though, Ben, I want to talk about sort of the Blazers, who are they're mostly young guys. They probably got a lot of dudes who are trickling back or have been in Portland all off season long. Just sort of big picture stuff. What are your thoughts on this team? And I will, maybe you're not familiar with my oeuvre. I'm pretty sure this is the worst team in the Western Conference. I'm fairly confident in that. But what are your feelings on them just in general?
Oh, this team's going to stink next year. Sure. But I do have I don't like totally hate the direction they're going in. And I like a lot of the pieces they have and the moves they've made. I do agree that they're probably going to suck this year, barring like a ridiculous like year 2 Scoot leap or like Shaden playing legit like an all-star, which are things that, like probably won't happen, but I wouldn't say are totally impossible. But yeah, I overall like the roster construction. I'm a Scoot optimist, as we'll talk a little bit more about later, I'm sure. I thought the Klingon pick was good. I thought the Denny trade was really good for them. I feel like there was a lot of divisiveness around that trade, just like generally. And then like the guy who the Wizards drafted.
Why did you like it specifically?
Well, I think getting an ascending player on that kind of contract is just generally good business, even if maybe it's not like a quote unquote like timeline fit. Like Denny's not an old guy, right?
He turns 24 in January of 2025.
Yeah, exactly. He's 23 right now, and he's like under contract for what, like 3 more years on an extremely
four more seasons. Yeah, exactly.
4 more seasons. Yeah, I don't have the number in front of me, but I know it's like a ridiculously cheap deal for how good this guy is becoming. And I feel like a lot of people understand that we didn't really watch much of the Wizards last season. But like he quietly made like big improvements. And I think oftentimes when we see like really good, like quote unquote role players forced into like, primary-ish roles on terrible teams, they can make big strides. Like I think we saw that from Jaren this year, Jaren Jackson. I think we saw that from Porzingis back in Washington. Like now Denny, maybe it's just the Wizards that are, bad. But point being, like Denny, he shot about 38% from 3 this year after hovering around 31%, 32% throughout his career, right? Like he was the most like prolific passer of his career, volume wise, at least, probably more because he was playing on the ball, and his defense was still great. So like I think Denny is a damn good player, and like I'm not sure if I'd call him like a star or anything. Like he's probably not going to be making all-star games anytime soon. But as like a really excellent complementary piece, I think there's a lot to like. Like Denny obviously is like a fantastic like cutter and secondary passer and like off-ball defender and stuff, right? And that stuff's all going to be there. And if he can like translate the improved scoring numbers to the Blazers, who are probably going to be another not very good team, but maybe a little more functional than Washington last year, probably around the same level, but he's just a very good driver, created more off the dribble this year, and then just like does everything else you want. So I really like that trade. I thought that was really good business, and like they didn't give up that much or anything.
Yeah, I think the price for Denny was pretty reasonable. I've said a bunch on the show is like, I'm surprised the Blazers were the team to pay that price in some ways. Like I'm surprised the Blazers in their position were the team to send out multiple picks. But I think the like overall value, like if you're just looking at the trade in terms of value, I think it's very reasonable and maybe even like a straight up good deal. Like maybe you got Denny on the cheap because you didn't give up premium picks. You just gave up like, you're probably giving up 2 middling firsts. And if you give up 2 middling firsts for a dude who's like that, you're basically buying his 24 to 28 years in the league on a very controlled deal. That's pretty good deal.
And one of the first is in a bad draft too. So like,
right. So, and if
I'm
like,
sure,
if,
I'm
like
sure
specifically
Schmitz knows that too. Like,
what do you make of the sort of the vets that are still around? Like, I know we're going to talk a lot about the young guys today, some guys coming into year 2, but like, what do you make of Jeremy Grant on this roster still? And Anthony Simons kind of hanging out in that in-between phase where he's like not old, 25, but he's in year 7 and all of these things. What do you make of sort of that when you think of their roster construction?
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird, honestly. The main one that I just like don't really get or know how he's fitting is Ayton. That's the main one where I'm just like, I mean, I can't imagine he'd be much of a priority considering they drafted Klingon in the top 10, and like Wap Reith had a really nice season last year, kind of out of nowhere. Robert Williams is still on the roster, right? Like who knows if he's going to play this year. I mean, he's a great piece to have. He just is, he's going to play.
If he's available, he's excellent. Yeah, if he's available, he's excellent, but it's like he's not going to be available. And the Blazers aren't a team where it's like, how can we maximize 38 really good games of Rob Williams? Better teams could maybe do that calculation, but like a bad team isn't like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to save Rob until April. It's like April is not when they care about winning. They care about winning in, I don't know, spring of 2027 or something like that. Like,
right, exactly.
It's a long time away. Yeah, the Ayton thing's weird, right? Because he's got 2 years left on his deal. So next summer he'll be an expiring contract. It would be really odd if he got another contract from the Portland Trailblazers after drafting Donovan Klingon, right? Like it seems fairly obvious that his days are numbered. And I think we have enough evidence that giving DeAndre Ayton maybe like negative motivation doesn't pay off.
Ayton's a good player, but I don't think he's like an additive player on a young team trying to develop and improve. Like he can do stuff, like he's gonna get buckets, he's gonna grab rebounds. Like he was scoring pretty well, if I remember, towards like the back half of the season. Like he does his thing. Like he is what he is at this point, right?
He does really, really well. What he does really, really well. But he doesn't really score. He doesn't score off the dribble very much. He doesn't pass. He's not an elite rim protector.
Very frustrating. Like one of like draft Twitter legend Alec Polarfall pointed out all season that like the difference between Wap Reith screens and Ayton's screens and how much of a difference there was for the guards. And it's like, like that stuff doesn't like seem important, but I think it matters when you're trying to like, when your aim, which the Blazers should obviously be, and it seems like they are, like developing young guys, because they've done a really good job of getting a lot of interesting young players in either like high in the draft, obviously, but like kind of on the cheap too, and out of nowhere, right? When it comes to like Camara and Jabari Walker and Reith and all those guys. I'm also not like, I feel like it's a weird transition state with these vets. Because Jeremy Grant to me is similar-ish, not as extreme, where he's like a floor-raising type player that isn't necessarily super helpful for like a developing team. Like another player who kind of, to me, like is what he is, right? He's gonna shoot. He's gonna hit threes at a good enough clips. Like he'll take his pull up mid ranges. He'll be like serviceable on defense at the 4, but he's not anything that's like he'll help you get to 30 wins, but I don't think there's much really there. But he's under contract until like 2027 or something, right?
Yeah, I believe he has 4 years left on his deal as well.
So that one, I also don't know how, like, maybe you can move that contract as like the tax cap continues to increase, or like if some contenders interested in that.
I think it's the length more than the number. It's like, does a team want to trade for 4 more seasons of Jeremy Grant in this climate where teams are going to be so cautious about their books and everything? Or, like it'll be interesting to see what that plays out as, because I don't think the number's crazy for what he does. Like, he's on a better team. Also, he's like complementary skills would be enhanced, as opposed to like on the Blazers where he takes like a lot of 19-foot post-ups, and it's like, please don't do it.
Yeah, no.
But I think it'll be interesting what his value is, because he is useful, but he needs context because he doesn't really rebound or pass. But I think he's an okay defender, and he can shoot and be an off-ball. You'd be your third, fourth option and be pretty darn good as that.
Yeah. Sure, like he can be really good in that role, but it's been a while since like he did that in like Denver, like what feels like so long ago at this point. And I honestly think Simons is kind of underrated. Just like, this is probably another case of like nobody watches the Blazers. And of course Simons like missed a ton of time last year too, so like that was kind of not really.
Yeah, he got hurt on opening night and missed the next like 20 games. Yeah. So it's like he was, even in the part of the season that you might have watched the Blazers, he didn't play.
He was really damn good on offense last year when he played, like 23 a game on about league average efficiency, like scorching from 3, passing the ball well. Like he was getting downhill more, if I remember, like doing more stuff as a primary. Like I'm still very interested to see what Simons, and I think Simons is a good enough like shooter that like you don't have to feature him as your focal point guy. Like if you're really trying to feature Scoot or Shaden or whoever else, like you can let Simon just like be a secondary guy and do that kind of stuff. So I think also I just think he's like a good player and is probably a little underrated. Like, he's never going to be a defender, I don't think.
Right. He's a negative on defense, which is tough to try to do the guard math with, because it's like, if
for now.
Yeah, again, a different context. I think he has real value because he's good off the dribble. He can score off the dribble, and that's good a value player in the league. Like if you can get to your own offense, particularly get to your own offense and shoot at the volume and the percentage he does from 3, that he has value as an offensive player. I think so too. Blazer fans are probably split. Some people think Anthony Simons stinks because like they've seen too much of him. 6 years, and it's like, I hate this guy. But and then I think there's Blazer fans who are like, he rocks. So yeah, it's
I think Simons, even if he's not like a perfect maybe like fit with the developing core, is probably good enough. Like, he's good enough to the point where like I want to keep him around to see like how he can continue developing. Like he's not old or anything.
No, he's 25, I believe.
Yeah, he's clearly gotten better. Like I think the passing as a pick and roll guy got better last year. Like his finishing has gotten better pretty much every year of his career at this point. Like it's not, or I think last year it actually took it down, but it was like,
the year before he was up in the mid 60s at the rim.
That's
and then
what I was remembering. Yeah.
This year he took a step back. Again, if he can get back there, he's a different player. Okay, let's talk youngsters. You've done a couple videos on your YouTube channel, which is linked below in the episode description for this episode, about Scoot Henderson and Toumani Camara. You released one over the weekend about Toumani. Let's talk two. Because I think he's a player that not enough people know about. That's what we'll do in the second segment. Join us there, won't you? But first, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Gametime. It's the place for last-minute tickets. It's the app that rewards you for waiting till day of or a couple hours before tip-off or whatever it might be. So if there's a sporting event you want to go to, like say for the rest of the summer here, or the rest of as we head into fall and the end of the season, you want to go see the Thorns in Portland, you want to go see the Timbers in Portland, well, there's no better app to use than Gametime. What I like about Gametime is super quick and super clean. So you open up the app, you search whatever you want to look for, and then with a few clicks, you're looking at the arena, and then what you see is what you get pricing. So if it says it's going to cost $58, it's going to cost you $58. There's no convenience fee for printing out a PDF or any of that nonsense. It's just the place that takes the guesswork out of buying last-minute tickets and buying tickets in general. Download the Gametime app, create an account and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, super simple. Create an account. Use the redemption code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. All right, still a pass first point guard. I usually do that in the third segment, but I guess we're doing it here too. All right, still chatting here with Ben Pfeifer. We're talking Toumani Camara. Ben, you had a video, and that video is linked in the episode description for the episode you were listening to, wherever you're listening to it, about Toumani. You're high on his defense. Give me your elevator pitch on Toumani Camara as entering his second NBA season.
Yeah, Camara is just like an awesome giant wing defender who can do a tiny bit of stuff on offense. Then maybe you're encouraged that he can continue to improve that. Like 6'9", incredibly fluid, plays really hard, really smart player, positions himself well. Is a good play recognition guy. He's what you want from an older rookie, but he actually is a real toolsy guy. And then his offense is nothing crazy special, but he has enough traits to where he's he's an amazing offensive rebounder. He can really cut. I know I was looking at it the other day before I was doing that video. I know he's one of the most prolific non-big offensive rebounders in the league last year. There were very
the Blazers they're a heavy crash team. They let him go get it. So he benefits from them basically having what I'll call limited rules on terms of who can crash. He can crash from anywhere, and they let him go get the ball.
And he does. He absolutely does. Yeah. And Camara, I don't know exactly what the ceiling is for him, but that's a guy who, obviously you need to find stars when you're rebuilding, when you're drafting, but you also need to find cost-controlled role players, right?
Yep.
And especially the benefit of a guy like Camara is obviously he was a rookie last year, but on a team like the Blazers, probably not going to be driving up his contract, his value a ton, at least in the next year or two. But he's just a really damn good player. Maybe you can be optimistic about the shooting. I know he shot the ball better over the last month or so of the year, but I'm not sure how bought in I would be on that. But I think he's a sick defender, really nice, kind of big wingish skills. Interesting slasher and scorer at the rim where he does enough stuff in terms of being pretty quick and flashing the ability to beat other bigs off the dribble, and he's kind of a wonky finisher to the point where I'm intrigued to see if there's anything more you can squeeze out of Camara. Obviously he's an older guy, he came into the league as a fourth year, so who knows how much more development there is, but we do see older prospects take real strides in the league. It's definitely not as common as when you draft.
Yeah, but say if you want to compare him really favorably to an older prospect, it's Herb Jones. He became just he became a really good shooter, right? It's he morphed from a dude who couldn't shoot, and they were having to get creative with how to use him. And then last year, Herb was no, I can shoot. I'm fine. I'm an above average jump shooter. It's fine. So I will say,
I will say and I had some people in my YouTube comments kind of echoing the sentiment who followed Dayton. I'm pretty surprised that Camara was as good as he was in the league. I have been loosely following him since he was a freshman at Georgia. He played with Anthony Edwards his freshman year at Georgia.
And am I right that he was recruited as a center? He was a center coming out of at that stage of his career. He was kind of a small ball five.
That's how so many of those guys are. Just because guys like Camara will play high school. I can't think of exactly where Toumani went to high school, but so many of these guys will play center for their random teams, right?
Right.
And they have all the big man skills. But yeah, Camara, I don't know, he was just kind of regular, honestly. He didn't pop. I know this is not crazy in-depth analysis, but he just did not pop to me, and clearly a lot of other people, as a lock NBA guy. And, I think he was always worth a flyer on just because he was really built, fluid, athletic wing, but there really wasn't a ton there in terms of projectable skills. He was a really good defender at the college level, but not necessarily the level of standout where I would have expected him to translate like this. But then he comes into the league and he's doing the exact same stuff he did in college and more, honestly, in terms of, I think, positional versatility and defending the ball. As I'm sure you and many listeners know, he guarded everyone last year, from Shea to Luka to Giannis to whoever. He wasn't doing that in college ever. I think he was more of like a weak side help guy in college, and he still like was able to do that in Portland. I mean, it's harder to be a functional off-ball defender when your defense is horrible, right? Like it's just
Right.
that's such a team thing, unless you're one of these like special guys like Herb Jones or someone like that. But yeah, like I'm surprised that Camara is as good as he was. He was a very pleasant surprise semester. I really enjoyed watching him.
Yeah, I think he was the best part of the
actually
Blazers season last year. I think he was straight up the best part of the Blazers season, which is
I think
maybe damning
he's
with
awesome.
faint praise, but like he was, they were so disjointed. They had so many injuries. They had all that mess. And like Toumani was a guy who was, someone else is in this trade from Phoenix. Like, I don't, people's like, oh yeah, they got the 52nd pick. Who cares? And then like by the end of training camp, I was like, he's going to play. And by 10 games into the season, it's like, he's going to start. And then at the end of the year, it's like, was he the best thing that happened to them all year? With all due respect to Duaprith, who was a darn fun story. But
I love Watt. I love him.
I'm curious what is. Yeah. Hey, listen. Next YouTube video. Get that Aussie. Get those Aussie eyeballs.
Dude, I need those seriously.
What do you view Toumani like in a perfect situation? What's his best defensive role? Like, is he an on-ball guy? Does he guard guards? Does he guard big wings? Like, what's the best version of him?
I think ideally you can like mold him into a versatile on-ball guy. That's probably his best role. I think maybe he's a little limited, like in terms of vertical pop, like off of a back pedal and moving and changing directions to be a real like backside rim protector. He's like a very good below the rim guy. Like he'll take charges and stuff and he'll get in the way of stuff. But I think there's a limit to how much you can really do that at the highest levels. Like there's a reason you don't really see a lot of players, like, there aren't that many players in the league like charge specialists, like Brandon Pochemski and like Jalen Williams, like are the guys I think of. But I think I would like to see Toumani in like, I don't know, like this is like not necessarily like comparing him to him, but I think of the role that like Klay Thompson had on defense during those like prime Warriors years, where he was just like a big chaser on defense and he would muck stuff up with his size and with his speed. And even though he wasn't an incredible athlete, like he was never a really like a crazy cerebral defender. Like he was able to just like play really hard. And I don't, like I said, Camara's not Klay Thompson on either end of the floor, but like again, someone who can be a real deterrent to these like. You probably don't want him as like your primary on-ball defender, right? Like I think he's probably not skilled enough as a point of attack defender to really guard like superstar ones, but like basically nobody is. Like that's almost not a real thing that exists. But I think he has enough in terms of like a secondary on-ball guy who you can trust off the ball. Like you don't have to be a guy who's like, I'm gonna hide him on a spot up shooter because we can't let this guy, be in off ball action. But that's not Camara. He's not like a crazy playmaker like Thibault or whatever. But he's also not gonna make he's also not gonna make the same kind of mistakes that a guy like Thibault is gonna make. Like he's not gonna be he's not gonna be screwing up all the time. That's what you want as like a. You're not featuring him as part of your off ball. Your weak side defensive plan. Like you're not making him be Derek White or whatever.
Yeah, like exactly. Okay, he'll clean it up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right. Yeah, but he can be like he's serviceable enough, and then someone who's just mucking stuff up with point of attack. I think you can continue to progress like his technique as in like changing direction and with his footwork. Like even for older rookies, I feel like footwork and stuff is so teachable and so coachable. Like we've seen guys improve with that plenty later in their career, and when that's like a guy's main issue, right? It's not the tools. Like we know Toumani is. He's big, he's fast, he's fluid, he's strong, he's really strong, which I love as well. Like such a strong player too. Where I think like definitely not a small ball five or anything, but someone who you can throw on bigger players like in a pinch because he is that strong. So those are kind of my ideas for Toumani as like. Defensive role wise going forward. It's like a very useful, like versatile piece. And there's like an awesome, it's like kind of player I love, like plays hard as shit. Like,
yeah, I think he is, the shooting is a little bit questionable, but I think he's on the roster, like one of the easiest sort of like plug and play for a good team. One of the, like, you could say like,
Yeah.
hey, Toumani, like on any good team, he's going to have a role because you know what you get with him. And again, like maybe the ceiling isn't super high, but you know what you're going to get. Okay, Ben, you're more of a Scoot believer than I am. Let's talk Scoot Henderson. I am not as Scoot pilled as you are. Let's talk Scoot in the third segment to close the show. Join us there, won't you? First, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Therapy can be an incredibly valuable tool, no matter what you're going through. We're all dealing with stuff. Some of us, it's big stuff. Some of us, it's just the little stuff that it populates our day-to-day lives. Whatever it might be, talking to a neutral third party, talking to a therapist can be incredibly valuable. And BetterHelp offers that opportunity. It's one of the most convenient and affordable options for therapy. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. BetterHelp can help you rediscover your sense of wonder or get back to better, more helpful ways of processing what you're dealing with. It's back to school season. And you can have your back to school era. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. Still talking here with Ben Pfeifer. You know him from the internet. Check out his YouTube channel, link below in the episode description. Ben, you did a video breakdown on a potential year 2 breakout for Sterling Scoot Henderson. What did you see from year 1 from Scoot that makes you believe that a breakout in year 2 could happen?
He's got to go by the government name now. But yeah, no, like there's certainly no denying that Scoot's regular season last year was kind of a disaster. I think maybe an overstated disaster by some, because the numbers looked really bad, and I think kind of inflated just by a disastrous early season.
It started so rough.
It started so rough, but I think the fact that even if the improvement, it wasn't like a massive improvement. It's not like he was like a good player by the end of the season. It was for sure different. Like, he didn't look like a total fish out of water. And if you the efficiency numbers, well, not great by the end of the year. I think by the last game, dunks and threes had him at a rolling true shooting of 56, which is a little bit below league average, but also a lot better than where he was early in the year, and just kind of in general. I think Scoot, kind of like we were talking about at the end of the Camara segment, has a lot of issues that to me are very low-hanging fruit fixable. But I'll say the one of those that isn't probably the case is the jumper, which would be my biggest hang up, I'd say, for Scoot, and Scoot being a real game-changing megastar. He's got to be better. He's got to be better as a shooter. That's not anything groundbreaking. But I think the fact that his mechanics are really not good at the moment is you can view that as room for optimism. It's because it's
right. Because
he can fix these. And I honestly think that's even more true for him as a finisher and a driver, where at the beginning of the season, especially, he was chopping his feet, throwing up random scoop layups, rushing into shots all the time, not exploding out of the stance, just kind of lollygagging to the rim. And it's just very frustrating for a player as obviously talented as Scoot, where I think if you can continue to help him clean up the footwork in terms of using his incredible stride length around the basket more, or being more flexible and planting on his drives to generate explosion. Because one of the most frustrating type of players to me is this guy who obviously is incredibly explosive, but doesn't have the footwork or other necessary body mechanics to tap into that. I'm sure people much smarter than me are helping him work and correct that, but I think that would really go a long way to unlocking things. Because to Scoot's credit, he had an awesome year as a playmaker last year. If there's one thing to hang your hat on, he's a sick passer. I don't think he's gonna be one of these S tier Trey Luka level passers. that's just never who he was. But like the next level of guy, like I think about where a guy like Devin Booker or Donovan Mitchell has gotten to as a passer, considering their starting points. And I feel like he could definitely get to that level. Like someone who's not going to necessarily be like a genius guy who's totally dictating the pace of games, right? There's not very many of those guys in the league. But when you have Scoot's level of driving stuff and advantage creation, which look, for all of Scoot's faults as a driver, like he got to the rim all the time. He didn't necessarily do good things with those opportunities, but he got there. And like, to me, I'd rather have a guy who can get in these high leverage spots and you have to teach him to slow down and to control himself and to work on than a guy who can't put the defense in rotation at all. So I think my optimism is certainly lower than it was coming into the season, but that's no doubt. But I still am willing to give Scoot another year or two before I would totally be out on him, just because like young guards are so rough a lot of the time. And Scoot has had fairly significant injuries like over the last couple of years of his career that he just hadn't had before. And like we've seen players, right, as they get older and start maturing and hopefully like don't continue to get recurring injuries, because obviously that would just be, you know, what can you do about that? But I think with a guy like Scoot, who seemed to over the last couple of years lose a little bit of his explosiveness because of those injuries, maybe start to get it back a little bit. I think as you saw him get healthier, get better at the footwork stuff, you start to see him get it back. And that's like an optimistic lens for projecting him forward. So that's my rose colored pitch for Scoot. But like I said, I think there's probably equal chance that he doesn't end up getting there. Like the shot never comes along, but who knows?
Yeah, I'm much more concerned about the layups than the. Yeah, I'm much more concerned about the layups than the shooting. He was like over the last 20 games, I think he shot about 35% from three. That's below league average, but that's like
that would be plenty good enough for him, assuming he can get to where he needs to get. Like as a driver, like that's fine. Like.
Yeah, 25 games is not enough of a sample to be meaningful. You probably need to shoot 35% for like 2 years in order for it to be meaningful. But it's
I look at a guy like De'Aaron Fox, who like he's like a career 33% guy from three, who in year 8 or 7 or 8 or whatever ended up taking a nice, you know, off dribble shooting leap and, you know, shot 37% for a year and was, you know, was a really damn good player. And players like Scoot, players like Fox, who are so devastating with their like explosion and their advantage creation and stuff. You know, they're different players. I think Scoot's probably a more like powerful athlete. Fox like had better touch and probably a little more skill.
The year that Fox made the All-Star team, he shot like 70% at the rim. Scoot is at like 42 or something, 43. Like he's
hey, you can only there's only room to go up at this point.
Agreed. I agree. The graph can only go one way, baby, because otherwise it's below. The axis does not go that far. You are not, you know, everyone likes to make those little scatter plots with phases. Your face ain't on the graph. But I think you mentioned it, and that's my concern is the feet. I think his feet get sped up, and I think he's like trying to do something, and then his feet are just he has no base. And the number I throw out all the time on the show, and I'll say it here, is 14. Scoot dunked the ball 14 times in 62 games. That's like one a week. That's like a dunk a week. Yeah,
like it's not enough for a guy of his level of athleticism. Absolutely.
Yeah, so like. I think Scoot's feel allows him for a variety of positive outcomes, because I think he can, like you mentioned, the passing. I think the thing Scoot does best as a passer is he understands the easy pass. And a lot of guys, they want to throw crazy passes. Scoot is totally comfortable being with, like, looking at the defense and saying, if he helps to the nail, this is an easy kick. And then he'll drive, the guy helps, easy kick. And like sometimes he's passing it to Jabari Walker and Chris Murray, and those dudes aren't cashing in threes, but like he's making the right easy read. And like,
I think
there's value in that.
People who watched him play would probably understand like the level of passer he is, because, you know, even though his assist numbers were like really good, like,
they were really good.
He had his assist rate was in the 95th percentile last year. Like he was dishing them out.
And that's on one of the worst offenses in the league. Like if he plays with better players,
very much that Scoot has like a lot of pathways to success. And I see Scoot, like, even if he doesn't hit this ceiling, which I think is still possible, but like, definitely not something I think you want to totally bank on. Like, I think his floor is honestly pretty good. Like I feel this way about a lot of these like really bursty, like explosive, feelsy guards who like struggle in other ways. Like I think of a guy like Dennis Smith Jr., who had like a disastrous first stint in Dallas, but like always had these tools and skills and like reinvented himself in later in his career and has become like a legitimately awesome player as like a second guard point of attack defender. Or I think of a player like, I don't know, like Colin Sexton, who was like pretty atrocious, like outside of volume scoring his first couple years. But because he had these tools, he was able to like reinvent himself into like a secondary complementary guard. So I think Scoot like has the skill set that even if he doesn't end up being a Fox or a Donovan Mitchell type, which of course, lofty outcomes, I think Scoot was the level of prospect that you could kind of hope for that.
100%. He was the level of prospect that you would expect him to be competing for an all NBA team on his rookie contract. That was still exactly what he was supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly. I think that assessment of his prospect status was totally fair. Like, I think that's exactly who he was. Like, he was an incredible player at Ignite for those 2 years. But like, I think these guys, or even like the most extreme example to me is like Markelle Fultz, totally like literally everything comically going as wrong as you could possibly imagine. And he still ended up being a guy who is a regular season rotation player because he can get to the rim whenever he wants. And, I think that's not a good floor. Like Fultz is probably not like someone you really want playing for your.
Yeah. Currently unemployed, I think, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I don't think it's like crazy that he's unsigned. Like, it's not like, oh my God, like I understand.
Agreed.
But point being,
so like, I guess
there's a floor.
Yeah, I guess my so I agree. I think we agree that there are a variety of positive outcomes, and I would also argue that I would agree with you 100% that Dennis Smith Jr. is like a positive outcome for a lottery pick because he's going to end up playing. He's going to have a 10-year NBA career, right? It's not going to be what he wanted, but he's going to play.
I wouldn't necessarily say that's a positive outcome for Scoot, though. I would say
that's the problem. It's bad for Scoot, and it's bad for the Blazers. It's bad.
It's really bad for the Blazers.
I think that's the situation where I'm in, and where maybe where I'm not even lower than you are on him. Like, I think maybe after we've talked through this, I think we have pretty similar read on it. Maybe you think that, whatever, we think the 95th percentile is more or less likely, but I think we have a very similar read on kind of where he is now.
Yeah. Like I tend to lean optimistic about like development, like understanding obviously that it might not happen, but just, yeah, absolutely. I was curious what you thought about defense last year, at least in terms of.
So I thought at the beginning of the year, it was the numbers suggested that he was really good, but when I watched him play, I was like, he's not good on defense. Like he's bad. But then like he was like 99th percentile in defense VPM, and I'm like, okay, well,
the numbers caught up.
Yeah, I'm like, this thing just doesn't know. Like he needs more minutes, because like then the numbers will be like, oh nope.
No, it's like when you play on a defensive team as bad as that, it's like your numbers are going to be wonky.
Yeah, and I think I worry that, well, maybe he'll be a better defensive playmaker because he has long arms and giant hands, and he has good anticipation skills. I worry that he's just never going to be big enough to be like a plus defender. Like, I think he could be pretty good, but it's like the height might be always a thing where it's like, you're always, every night you're 6'2". It doesn't matter what you do.
Scoot is athletics enough to where like it wouldn't shock me if he ended up being like a real impact defender at some point. Cause like you said, like freakishly like strong, quick hands, the same like explosion. And he had, I think he had like a very regular rookie point guard defensive season, just like low effort stuff, zoning out off the ball, right? You saw the flashes of playmaking as like some rim protection stuff. He was like his ability to like keep his balance and like swipe down on ball handlers is genuinely like really good already. It's I remember he surprised, like, I think it was an away game against the Clippers where he got Harden on that a couple times, and he was like, "What? Like nobody ever does that to a guy like James Harden." So
James Harden, one of the strongest hands in the league. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the Blazers were such a disaster on defense last year that like I'm willing to give some grace, because it's like, yes, Scoot was like part of the problem, but it's really hard to stand out on defense in a really bad defensive environment. Like it's just very hard to do. So, I think maybe something. I think I think I agree with you. It's like I think it'll be all right. I think it'll be fine.
Yeah, I think he can be pretty passable. I'm curious kind of what that, if he could be a plus defender, or like a slight plus, neutral to positive defender every night. A friend of mine pitched me on this, is that they think because of the long arms, they were saying he could be George Hill. And it was like, maybe George Hill was never this really high level defender, right? But he was a very functional part of a bunch of good defensive teams. And they were trying to pitch me on like, Scoot, like, Mike, you're a hater. Scoot could be George, like Scoot on.
I feel like as a Pacers fan, I feel like that's kind of a high bar. I feel like that might kind of undersell like peak George Hill on the.
Oh, George Hill is like on those teams that made the conference finals. He was elite. Obviously,
yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think like that's kind of the defensive vision where I think Scoot, can and most. It's unusual if high usage rookie guards are good defenders. Like that's unusual. Agreed. Whereas like this is what you expect with rookie guards who do a lot on the offense. Like they're almost 100% of them are terrible on defense, but a lot of them get better, right? Because that's kind of how it goes when these guys age. But I think like there's enough in there for me with Scoot that I think like it's possible that he ends up being a really impactful defender. I don't think he's ever going to be like an all defense guy because like you said, he is 6'2", 6'3", whatever. There's a reason most of the best defenders in the league are wings and bigs, right? It's just kind of how the sport works.
And I would say like for someone like Luka Doncic, who's like not a good defensive player, but is so much easier for him to be okay to good on defense because he's a giant person. And if you had to pick, you would probably be the giant person because it's just like, yeah, Luka's really strong and really big and he's hard to push around and he's 6'7". So it's like,
and it's like look, and I think the Blazers are, to their credit, I think they're building a nice young defensive core around.
They clearly
around their defense questionable guards. Like who knows how Scoot and Simons and Shaedon are going to turn out on the defensive end. I think Shaden's probably the most optimistic of those guys, but even then, it hasn't been like he hasn't been like a crazy.
He hasn't been good.
Defender.
He hasn't been good. Yeah,
right. He was. I think obviously he's a guy who I was so bummed. Like I love watching him play, and I think his defense was like definitely better than it was as a rookie, but still nothing crazy. But yeah, like with I think Klingon was like a perfect fit for this core. Obviously we talked about Camara. I really like Jabari Walker too on the defensive end. Like
Denny is a good defender.
Exactly,
Yeah, Chris Murray for like I don't know what he's ever going to be on offense in the NBA, but he was a pretty good defender for an older rookie. Like. You could see the vision, right? Like you could see the vision. They're far away, and the chances are that whenever they're good again, the roster is going to look totally freaking different. But that's the nature of this.
The process of stacking, because for better or worse, the Blazers are guard heavy in terms of their star level outcome guys. That's I think that extended to even like the pre-Schmitz tenure, right? Like that's just how this is trended for the last decade or whatever. But I think building like a versatile defensive wing and big room is like something that maybe like the prime Blazers with Dame like really wish they had.
Oh man, do they ever?
Right?
Like used Toumani Camara at pretty much any point there. From,
relying on guys like Aminu and Harkless as your best defenders, who were good defenders. Like they could play, but they weren't guys who you wanted to be like your 1A defenders.
Right. And the guys off the bench in those eras were Alan Crabb and they're Rodney Hood. They were missing sort of like the other plus defenders in the back.
Rodney Hood.
Yeah. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. We're getting shout out to Jake Layman. Shout out to my man Tim Quarterman. All right, Ben, I kept you a little long, but this was a whole bunch of fun. Thanks for joining the program.
For sure. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I honestly this is I am very fascinated by the Blazers. They're one of my favorite. They might be my favorite bad team in the league.
We love to hear it. We'll have you back then. That's the type of returning guest that we like to hear is like, listen, fascinated by a bad basketball team. Well, guess what? They're going to have a high pick. And they're going to have a high pick in a really incredible draft next year. So Yeah, so there we go. If you're looking for more of Ben's work, you can follow him on Twitter, and that'll be linked in the episode description below. And YouTube videos he has really good breakdowns of Toumani and Scoot's game. They are linked in the episode description as well. Come back for tomorrow's show. We're beginning. Actually, you are listening to Monday show. It's coming out Monday evening. On Wednesday, we're beginning our player previews with the countdown to training camp. Player 1, the capsule, Denny Avdia. You are not going to want to miss it. Tell your friends about the podcast available wherever they get podcasts, and also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.